Welcome to the PWQA Tech Talk entitled Strategic Training. It's my pleasure to introduce my good friend Candice Wentling, principal at Certified Action. Candice and her company work with small and large businesses all over the country, helping their businesses do better. Candice, tell us about strategic training.
So I'm really excited about this one actually, because I think so much we focus on long-term goals or how we want to achieve something. But I think in order to really look at that, especially in times we're in now, is we need to step back and be like, what is training and how can I be strategic with it? Because it does cost money and it is an investment, and training has to be planned, right? So I thought, why not just go back to the basics and really talk about the elements of training, include some statistics about training. That way dealers can make wise decisions, going into the next year and forecasting and planning and making sure they're getting best bang for their buck, but also following through on what employees need from us.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And Candice, you as an industry practitioner, you started out, you've worked in sales, you've worked in sales management. And so I'm excited for all of the participants on our call to get some insight from an industry veteran, somebody who's been on the other side of the fence, who's actually talked the talk and walked the walk. So Candice, let's talk about training and how we as dealers and business owners can maximize our investment in making our employees smarter.
Yeah, let's do it. And I need to say a disclaimer real quick. Much of what I know is from making mistakes. I've made mistakes as a salesperson. I've made mistakes as a leader. And the biggest thing is learning from them and adjusting from them and moving forward. So a lot of this is just showing what I've learned over the years, being successful in sales and successful in sales management. So I want to be able to kind of give that insight to dealers. But this presentation is not going to give you necessarily a lot of how-tos. The goal here is to give you the information you need to make good decisions. Okay. I think too much we always give the answers to stuff, but then that may not fit exactly what your organizational goals are. Make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. That's exciting.
Okay. So let's do this. So let's start. I got to start it with a quote, because why not? I love this quote from Henry Ford. The only thing worse than training an employee and having them leave is not training them and having them stay. We all have the 15, 20-year veteran. That's almost like a cancer in the dealership sometimes, right? You have to rely on them to do some training, but then they poison the mind of your new person on everything that's wrong with the company, everything that should be changed and all of that. So sometimes it's better to invest in someone and lose them than have them stay and not train them, right? Because we really want people on board with where the company is going. Next thing, I need to kind of link all our priorities together. Okay, so if we look at an organization, I would say for the purpose of what we're talking about today is there's three components in this triangle. At the top, we have company goals, and I hope you have them. If not, we need to talk more, okay? But every organization should have goals or a mission or a vision of where they're going, okay? Then at the bottom of the triangle, what supports those goals in achieving them? We have the corporate promises. And what I mean by corporate promises is when we hire somebody, we promise a lot. Okay, we tell them there's a training program, there's benefits, they're this, we'll support you. And we say everything because salespeople especially are hard to find. Hey, let me rephrase that. Good, solid, reliable, ethical employees are hard to find. So we make a lot of promises in the beginning to our people. All right, much like we do our customers, right? To try to get the sale, we promise things. Well, what that creates is employee expectations, yes? If I promise you something, you're going to expect something from me. So we have these 2 points at the bottom of the triangle, and we have your company goals at the top. So what's in the middle? Okay, what is linking all these priorities together? Newsflash, it is education. It's education and engagement. Okay, so often we want our employees to make good decisions. We want them to be on board with our company, that we want them to be engaged and treat our customers well and work well with others. Okay. But we don't understand that education plays a huge role in any type of engagement. Education and knowledge is the foundation to anything else that your organization is going to be doing. So, in terms of that triangle, the center of that triangle is education and engagement. Education is first for a reason, because I cannot engage an employee if I don't first educate them. Make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And Candice, in your experience with helping companies get their sales team tuned up, have you found that small business owners tend to have high hopes for getting training across and they're not able to get it through to the team? What do you see in the real world?
That's a really good question. And I might answer it a little bit differently than how you're asking it. I think a lot of times we try to hire people in our likeness. Okay, we try to find people that think like we do and are successful like we do, because if you run an organization, chances are you're kind of a self-starter, you're a self-learner, you kind of took that initiative to do things on your own. But what leaders don't understand is most of the population is not like that, or else everybody would be in a leadership position. A lot of people need their hand held, a lot of people need that support and someone else to initiate that learning. So we often become disappointed with our new hires because what we thought was like us isn't like us. And I want to encourage you to be open minded that, yes, sometimes we lose people because they weren't what they said they were. But however, in my experience, most of the time is because we didn't follow through on the promises we made. Okay. So I want you to switch your thinking more from what you expect from your employees to your role and your promises. Okay. I would rather have them leave and you did everything you could versus the other way around. And one last comment with that is, when you do hire an employee and when you do train them, you better believe in them. You know, employees need security. And when we kind of toss around and threaten, and if you don't achieve this, and then that security hinders performance big time. So we really have to pay attention to our role in this and not so much theirs.
That's awesome. Thank you. I agree 100%. That's very wise.
Are you ready to keep going? I might hurt your feelings.
Yes, ma'am. You're good. Let's
All
hear it.
right. So we have the answer. What connects the priorities? Education, engaging our employees. Okay. And us leading the way on that, us facilitating it. So here is the ultimate goal here. There has to be a reason to do anything. And what we want to achieve in training is we want to get results. Yes, this efficacy piece. Efficacy is the ability to produce a desired result, my intended result. But that doesn't just happen. And we often think it will. We just think if we just put people in the right positions, it'll just happen. But there's two things before this. Okay. We have education, which is what we're talking about today. And then we have this idea of empowerment. Empowerment, and here's where I might hurt your feelings. We want employees to be empowered, but do you know what that word means? Okay. Empowerment is giving authority or power to your employees, where they can make decisions for your organization, where they are given wiggle room and freedom to make decisions. And so often we restrict that. So we want it, but then we restrict it as leaders. And I have to warn you, if you educate and train your employees, they're going to become engaged, which is going to empower them, which is a good thing. Okay. But we often hinder that. So if you do invest in a lot of training, are your results being hindered because you're keeping them from having the authority and the power they need to be engaged in your organization?
That's powerful. In fact, in my line of business, we often see that with small business owners. Their egos get in the way of their businesses because they're almost afraid that their employee might become better than them at what they do. And so I'm really glad that you're talking about this, because it's the key to success is allowing your people to fly.
Yes. Yeah. And what we do is we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot. And what happens is then we don't see the results that we want. And then we cut our budget next year on training. And here that piece was you didn't give them the authority or the power to practice what you taught them. Okay, so I want you to be open minded to what our role is. Again, dealers, I need you to focus on what your role is. Too often we focus on what we think other people should be doing, and it's a waste of your time. And that's personal advice too. We can't control anything about anybody, but we can control what we do. So I'm going to throw some statistics at you. And this is not to say that you fit into it. I just want to give you some insight. Again, the more I educate you, the more you can make decisions, okay? Much like how we train our employees. But the one thing here is this is all small business statistics, and this is from the 2018 Training Industry Report. Small companies had these smallest annual budgets. However, the percentage of their budget was higher than larger organizations, which tells me, okay, you would think it'd be opposite, right? But it tells me that I need, as a small business, I've got to rely on the success of my business with less people, okay? And I need them to be their very best. So I want you to think just because you're small doesn't mean that the portion of your budget shouldn't be allotted. So let's take a look at these. First, smaller organizations, and I chose in the manufacturer, distributor, and service industry, which I think most aligns with our dealers. They average about $350,000 a year in training spending. Now, that might seem like a lot, or it may not seem like enough, depending upon your size. However, smaller organizations are investing in it, and they're investing a good portion of it. Okay. So, think about how much percentage you're allotting to your own business. Second, this one surprised me, Greg, but maybe it doesn't. I don't know. It surprised me, but it didn't. Average training expenditure per employee in small businesses in these categories was less than $1,100 a year per employee. And that training total was less than 60 hours. That's a week and a half of a work week. Think about, say, 50 weeks, 48 weeks of work, and 1.5 of those was dedicated to training. Is that enough? And the $1,100 a year, but that's what, $100 a month that you're investing in that employee. So I might be stepping on your toes because your number might be less than that. Okay. But again, this is an average figure. Next, executives and managers in corporations in small companies are the least trained groups. Only 10% of executives were involved in any sort of training programs, and only 24% of managers were involved in any training programs. We will talk about that in a moment because that's a problem. If you yourself as a leader are not learning, you're not going to grow. Okay. And we're going to talk about that in a second. 72% of small companies used an LMS system. Okay. Which tells me that, in recent years, they're using online training, log in, complete this, and that's a lot with onboarding. And then 79% uses blending learning, which is online and in person. And lastly, 70% of small organizations outsource their training, meaning they use the use of a consultant or marketing company or anything like that. Facilitation, learner support. And that was interesting too, because the insight I got from that is smaller organizations are recognizing they can't be the end all be all to their employees for multiple reasons. One, time. I hear that the most from organizations I work with is the time to do it. And two, they recognize that bringing in additional knowledge and not limiting it just to what's in your own organization. So I hope this kind of broadens a little bit of what average smaller organizations are doing in our industry.
So that makes a lot of sense. And for these statistics, these small organizations, you're looking at small as in 1,000 employees or less. Mm-hmm. Is that right? So that $1,000 number, is interesting, because I think that jives with what I see out there when I talk to people. There's not enough resource expenditure on training people. It's almost like the small business owners in this tough situation where they're kind of an owner operator, and they barely know if they can afford to hire one more person. And then they bring that person on, and they're out there in the field turning a wrench and making sales and testing water and running a truck and fixing systems. And then they're coming home and trying to do the bookkeeping, the accounting, and everything else, and make sure payroll gets paid. And they think they don't even have a minute in the day to do it. And I think a lot of the time it comes from the fact that they don't quite understand the return on investment that they're going to get by spending a little more time training. You know, the burden for those of us that are business owners, the burden of ownership is 24/7. You don't get to hang your ownership hat up at night. It's like being a parent to a whole lot of children. But it's as rewarding as being a parent, because as you nurture and grow your team delivers financially for you, but there's an inherent satisfaction in seeing people progress personally. So, Candice, maybe could you go into a little bit about some of the terms and terminology, ROI? You know, for a lot of people in the water treatment industry, they come from a trades background, they didn't go to business school. Can you drill down into that a little for them, and kind of talk about what these terms mean and why, and how to internalize it more?
Definitely. Definitely. I want to give you one more thing, food for thought. What do your employees want? Okay. What do employees want from you? So 41% in this study said they would like more training. Employees said that. More than half of the respondents were they wanted needed to be interesting and engaging. So I wonder if that's why 41%, if that number would be higher if training was more engaging. Yes. You know, but 41% is still pretty high. They are desiring, employees want training, especially your younger ones, as you'll see here. So take a look at this, Greg. 69% of employees under the age of 40 say training plays an important role in their decisions to stay with their current company position. You know, a lot of people struggle to keep good people. Why? They're being offered more from somebody else. If we engage and train our own people, they're going to stay, but this plays a big role in if they're staying. But even 40 and over, this dropped 10%, but it's still over half. So if you've got a couple sales guys that are over the age of 50, which have been some of my most stellar ones to work with, you know, if you can get them open-minded enough, those are your rock stars. So a lot of times we don't train our older employees, but they still desire it. Okay, and here this aligns with the stats that we saw just a second ago. Look at this. Only 26% of employees had 11 or more hours for the whole year in training. All the rest of these were less than 10, less than 5. So 74% of employees got less than 10 hours of training.
That's craziness.
Crazy. But I also think most of the leaders the feedback I get, well, I was never trained. I never had that. Well, of course, that's why you're in a leadership position. You have that personality. But if you didn't, you wouldn't be there still. Okay, we have to think not everybody learns the way you do. Not all of us think the same way. Okay, so to get to your stats, let's get to some terms here. And these words are going to sound familiar, but I'm all about definitions. We need to understand the words we use. Okay, so first let's talk strategy. Strategy is long term. It is a trajectory. Okay, it is the actions and the decisions that we make to reach our goals. Okay, it's a method or a plan to bring about a desired future. We get so stuck in the now. It's like we try something and then it didn't work and we're like, oh, and then it goes away. We implement something and then, 3 months later, we don't know what happened to it. And then at our next employee meeting, we're like, oh, why did we stop doing that, right? Strategy is the decisions we make for that future result. If we're not focused on the future, what I just described will happen. Second, investment. Training is an investment. It's a purchase made with an objective that will provide future returns or increase their value. Yes? Investment is much different than cost. Okay. And then ROI, for the purposes of training, ROI is the measure used to measure efficiency. Okay. So we have an investment, and ROI determines what is the efficiency, what's our return on that. So it's relative to cost. However, with training, I need to get away from this term cost. Employee training is not a cost. It was the promise you made. It is what employees expect. It is not a cost. Buying a route truck is a cost. Okay? Employee training is an investment that fuels and supports your strategy.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people still think of employees as liabilities. They still see an employee as just a number on the payroll every month, and drives them nuts that they're having to pay people to come work for them instead of them just coming for the adventure.
Yeah.
And when we think about training as an investment in not only your employees' future, but yours, your business. If you're building a business and you want to be able to retire one day or sell that business or have a revenue stream that's cross-generational, you have to invest in your people.
Mm-hmm. And I know most don't operate like this, but I've seen some companies cut employees just to take numbers off the bottom line, just to
Yeah,
show an increase.
it's too bad that happens.
You might show a short-term success, but you're going to see a long-term failure. And we are in the industry that's long-term. Water isn't going anywhere, and the need for it is going to increase. And if you paid attention to WQA's, governmental affairs, this is huge. Water is huge. I need you to understand how important it is to have employees educated and engaged, because it is coming.
What a great time to be in the water industry.
I'd say. So here's the fun stat. I want to wrap up everything I've thrown at you. And this comes from the study as well. When employers spend $1,500 per employee per year on training, they achieved improvements in their profit margins of 24%. Add to that, every additional $680 you spend over that $1,500, you'll see a 6% return. How's that for return on investment?
I like it. That's better than the stock market right now.
I mean, yeah, that is so true. But what I want you to hear is, and the next couple slides we'll be talking about, if you follow some of the concepts I'm talking about, you will see these results. You will. It is inevitable. Okay.
And I think that's good for small business owners to see, because $1,500 a year sounds like a lot of money to some people, and it's hard-earned money. No matter how much money you make, every dollar counts. But putting in $1,500, that's just over $100 a month to train someone and continuously train them and reinforce them.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to be a damn fool if you didn't think that was a good idea.
For sure. For sure. And say, like a sales team, say you have 4 people on your sales team, that's $6,000 per year for the year.
Yeah, that's a wise investment. I mean, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah. So let's see, how do we make sure? So yes, I've hopefully convinced you of the fact of a training budget should not be a matter of how much do I have left over for training, but at the beginning of your forecasting and planning is how much can I give to it? Okay, I want it to be how much can I give to this, because I know there's a return, but how can I maximize that return? Okay, because we all know some training we've put in has not been successful. So let's look at a couple other concepts here. Oh, I forgot about this, Greg, at the bottom. So we just talked about all those great benefits. Look at the bottom. 40% of employees with poor training will leave the company within the first year. I know you can spout off names to me. There are people you have hired that have left within the first year.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately more common than we realize, because when you don't train someone to excel, they don't excel, and then you're disappointed, they're disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, it's your own fault, and we forget that. We don't realize.
I want it to go back to
get people trained.
Yeah, we have to take responsibility for some of these, and I guess I should have said this disclaimer at the beginning, but everything I say is 80% of the time. Dealers, I know you have that one anomaly that didn't fit in. I know that you had that one training program that you put $18,000 in. Like, I know we have all those anomalies. I don't care about those. Okay. I care about the 80% of things that we can control. Okay. And 80% of the time, if we lost someone in the first year, there was something we could have done to lessen that chance.
That makes sense.
Okay. So let's see how we can make wise decisions moving forward. So let's talk about a couple training types. First, orientation. Everybody's heard this word, right? But often this is where we stop. Okay, so orientation, this is all talking about company mission, vision, values. What's the company about? Where are we going? What are our expectations of you, of other departments? What are the policies we need to follow? This is the core stuff. But what doesn't happen, and this is another session, actually boot camp at WQA, I think we'll talk about it more, but company mission and vision. We don't tell our employees what that is, if we even have it. At the very beginning, we should be teaching our people what our company mission and vision, where are we going and how are we going to get there, and what values are going to support it. And then what are the expectations? Honestly, what we jump to a lot of times is just this policies and expectations. We skip giving them an inside view to our company. Next is compliance. Okay, other stuff that we just got to check the boxes, sign this paper, diversity, harassment, OSHA, HIPAA, safety. Okay, these are honestly what I just said. We just sign the paperwork and move on. But is that an area in your department that you need to invest more training in? Next, onboarding. Onboarding is different than orientation. And orientation is just welcome, here's what we do. Okay, onboarding is ongoing. And I like to think of onboarding in two phases. I would say you have your normal onboarding, and then we have advanced. Okay, at some point in time, we should move our employees to more of an advanced level, but we don't. So, onboarding, this is all about teaching them the culture, incorporating them into the culture of your organization, engaging them. This is about their productivity, skill building, performance. Okay, this is getting them to the place of really being their best. Next is technical. We're really good at this. I think so. At least most of the organizations that I've worked with in the industry are very, very good at technical training. They know their products, they know how they compete with competitors, they know all of that. Okay. But technical, this is product training, services we offer, software, programming, how everything works. Okay. The only thing I would add with this one is sometimes where we miss is we don't expose different departments. So often we train, say, our service team, but our sales team doesn't know anything about it. And this can sometimes cause discord with customers because they're like, how do you not know? Or, you know what I mean? But I think that technical training should really be anybody that's in front of a customer. Next, managerial and leadership. This one's on the list because do you remember that stat from earlier? Only 10% of executives and 24% of managers have any type of training program. This is all about delegation and motivation and coaching and influencing and that strategy we talked about. How can we achieve and decision make on a strategy if our managers aren't even trained on how to do that, right? And then last, my favorite, soft skills. What are soft skills, Candice? Conflict resolution, time management, ethics, etiquette, communication, basic human interaction stuff, guys. We don't train on this. People don't know how to actively listen. They don't know how to handle a conflict or to problem solve through something. So here's all the training types. Out of all of these, I'm highlighting three. One, onboarding. I think we're good at the beginning stages, the first 90 days, sometimes. If you have a plan, that's another training. But if you don't have a plan, if you are not in control of your employee training in the first 90 days, you're going to lose them, or they're going to be an employee that's going to cause you problems long term. But the reason I highlighted it is because we never do advanced. So when we got an employee that is doing everything we taught them or meeting your standards, why don't we take them to the next level? Why don't we, get some outside training to take them to a higher sales level, to talk about that deeper, say, how to handle stalls and objections, right? We don't take them to more advanced training. The next one I want to highlight, talking to you managers, is we don't do this. We don't train ourselves and we don't train our management staff. If you have managers below you, we really just use them as a middleman sometimes. I need you to write this person up, or I need you to run this meeting, or I need you to train this person, but we don't train them and we don't train ourselves. And the moment you stop learning is the moment you stop growing. And lastly, soft skills. Guys, even as leaders, I mean, just tune into any, you know, uh, news channel, and you can see that our world is not good at these soft skills. Okay. And I've got to say this, you know, in my younger years, I'm talking like I'm old, but when I got into sales very young, and I look back at some of the things that caused me a lot of stress or how I reacted in some instances, and this was the problem. I was not trained on how. I was easily offended. I really stood up for myself, or something was always to blame and this had to be fixed. And I wasn't good at the soft skills. My ideas might have been good, but how I went about trying to get them were way off.
So, how do we as business owners find a way to justify all of this? I mean, I look at this as a business owner and I go, wow, I don't have time to even train myself, let alone anybody else.
You
how
know,
how can our viewers get some nuggets of wisdom from you on how to focus, compartmentalize, how to maybe sell themselves on the value of that return on investment? How can they make sure that they can see the destination is worth the journey?
well, if I'm as good at this as I think I am, I think I have a lot of people watching this right now where their mind is a spinning. Oh, I need to get my managers trained better. Oh my gosh, I need you to calm down for a minute. Okay. I need you to just calm down and keep listening to me. First, we need to strategize. You should have an employee file for each person. When they first come, did I do that orientation? Did I check all the boxes? Do they know their expectations? Can they tell me my company mission, right? Start at the beginning. Then look at yourself. Really truly evaluate yourself, which takes a lot of humility, but it's so worth it. Where am I lacking? What can I do better at? Do I need to get better at handling difficult conversations? Okay, identify those areas, but just stop, calm down, and just look at each individual where they're at. So often we talk about onboarding, any type of training, we're always onboarding, onboarding, onboarding. But you have employees now, right? Not everybody's a new employee. So you need to look at opportunities where you're like, oh, wow, maybe I can really get something into culture. Or, I really want to look at influence. How can I better influence my employees, right? You set these goals or where you think you're lacking. Okay. But I will say, moving forward, if you can get good at the orientation and onboarding and having a plan for your employees from the beginning, you're going to see much better results. That's not to say you can't train your current staff, but you've got to get really good at being consistent and following through on it. So I just want, there's two aspects here. We have new people coming in and we got people we already got.
And old dogs can learn new tricks
They sure can.
and should.
As sales management, my most successful employees were ones that I either inherited or moved to come with me, and they were older gentlemen. And coming from a female trainer, I was like, oh gosh, I knew I could help them, but The moment they became open-minded and trusted me, I had one guy who was able to retire early. I was mad because I lost him, but I was really proud of the fact that I allowed him to retire early and live where he wanted. And, it's so rewarding to see that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. So now we know all these training types. And like I said, you're probably feeling overwhelmed or not sure where to go. I truly recommend partnering with someone. I truly recommend either it's a personal advisor or someone to help you navigate all this. Because the last thing I want you to do is try to put your hands in all of this all at once, and you're going to stress out. You're not going to do well, and employees are going to be like, what is going on here? Okay. So, and that's why I think at the beginning we saw that 70% of employers used outside people. And I think this is one way we can use an outside person. So here's where I want you to take a little bit here, Greg, because I know I want your input on return on investment, because so often we focus on the financial aspects. If I invest this, I get this. But there's also these non-financial. So tell me a little bit about your experience.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because so much of what we do in any business, water or not, there's a lot of intangibles that are floating around. And in today's world where we're so connected, where we depend so heavily on our Google, Yelp, Home Advisor, Bing reviews, more now than ever before, and it should have been important on day one, but I think people could get away with being lax on company culture. Now more than ever, company culture is incredibly important. And we can't just have smart employees that are technically smart. We have to have emotionally intelligent employees. We have to have employees that can understand what the customer wants, how they want to be treated, and be able to represent your organization and your mission and your goals well. In our water dealerships, we have three simple goals. Number one, make that client's life better by improving their water. Number two, create and sustain a lifetime service relationship with them. And number three, feed your family. Make a profit so that the business can be there next year, and make sufficient revenue so that you can meet and attain your personal financial goals. All of that takes training. All of that takes repetition. All of that takes constant engagement from management up and down with your employees. And so I look at the non-financial and the financial, and they're bound together. It's this Gordian knot that you just can't untie. But unfortunately, it's hard for us to sometimes measure the benefit. If somebody brings in a trainer, or if somebody goes online and gets training, somebody engages WQA's modular education program, you're not going to necessarily be able to say, okay, my employees did 6 modules last night, and I expect to see a 3.15% improvement in sales tomorrow. But it's kind of like advertising. You don't realize how much you're benefiting from it until you stop doing it. And if you can create that culture of training and continuous improvement through training, you're not only engaging your people more, which helps them understand your values and internalize the values of the organization, they're able to now bring those values to the forward and work with your clients in a way that you're proud of.
Yeah.
And that just really excites me, Candice, seeing what you're talking about here and reminding everybody watching that training is really the cornerstone of your company. Mm-hmm. If you're not training, you're preparing to fail.
Mm-hmm.
You may as well just go home.
Stagnant.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which ultimately you can't stay at stagnant. It's either going to go down a road, but that pause can last a while. I love how you said financial and non-financial is married. They are, especially when it comes to training. Remember, I want to get away from this word cost. When I was preparing for this, I love looking at studies and data and especially like testing where they've tested different and in one of the studies I saw, they wanted to completely take the word return out of training. They didn't even want that. It was just what you had to do if you wanted to have a service operation. Okay. And I kind of found myself somewhere in the middle. I think it's important to understand that there is a return on training. However, we've got to get away from cost versus return. Okay, that's what we need to get away from. And I'm not saying, some of the things I measure when I train, especially when I do sales training, is I'll start and look at, hey, what's my average revenue per order? What's my closing ratio? And then we measure that. Is that going up? So that's an example on a return that I think is very tangible. However, the non-financial things are there too that we don't look at if we become closed-minded to money.
Makes a lot of sense.
And other things like non-financial, we have safety, we've got customer satisfaction, we've got our own personal sense of accomplishment, right? There's so many other things involved in that. So let's take a look here. One last comment I want to make with ROI, in my opinion. So we have our training expenditures going on. Okay, so now I've sold you. You're going to have a training budget. All right, congratulations. Now, how can I make this most effective? Well, you see that arrow? I need everything going the same direction. How about performance objectives? So if I identify what it is that I want my team to do, I can then align my training. So, say for instance, those types of training we just covered, if I want to see my closing ratio go up by 10%, I'm going to choose a training program that fuels that, right? It aligns, it's going in the direction. So often we just are like, let's try this, let's try that. We really get stuck in motivation phase. I think we get stuck in like the rah, but then the people are like, I want to do it. And then they're like, I don't know how.
What
Right?
do I do? What do I do now?
Yeah. Guys, I need you to understand, dealers, please. If you remember anything I say, I want you to remember this. Employees want to do well for you. They do.
That's profound. That's something a lot of business owners forget. They forget that our employees do want to please us and they want to do a good job. They're not just there to punch the time clock.
They
And if you have an employee just punching a time clock, you probably
yeah.
failed.
They do. They want to do well. When you start to see that drop is when they feel like they're not capable of doing it. When we have brought an employee to that level, it's actually a sad story. I mean, then they start, much like children, they start to react and trying to get attention in bad ways. And, y'all know what I'm talking about, right? And then we have the business results. And this can go this way or this way. And that's the thing, when we align things, we could start with, let me define what I want my results to be. Okay, what performance objectives will support that? Okay, here's my training. But everything needs to overlap and go in the same direction, right? If I am really struggling on my average cost per order, I'm not necessarily going to spend time in just motivating, right? I really need to narrow down what the issue is. And one of the best ways you can do that, and this is for free, go out in the field, go watch your employees, go see what they do. You'll find a lot of answers there.
So, Candice, they're sold on training.
Yeah.
They get their training done. And then they're done for life, right? You only need to train
Oh,
an
yeah.
employee
One
once,
time
right? But
investment.
you have
It's
a
kind of
train
like,
one training in January and
it's
then you're
good.
good.
You're good. I think it's kind of like, flea and tick prevention for dogs. You only got to do that once, right?
Yeah, point taken.
No, no, it's ongoing. Okay. Anything when we take our foot off the pedal, it's going to decelerate. Okay. I kind of, how my style of things is, I find myself very empathetic, very compassionate, but I'm also going to push you because you can. I expect people to operate at their best. I expect myself to operate at my best, right? When we take the foot off the pedal, we're saying, that that's not expected or that our best isn't okay, right? So I'm not saying you've got to have your employees doing training 10 hours a day, but employees should know what's next. If I hit this level, what's next, right? There's so much in that list. There's so much in there. Just in that list I showed you, you could keep an employee trained for their entire career and yourself. So expected returns, because that's what we need to understand. What should I expect from training, right? And I want you to expect results from training. I don't want you to say, Candice said to train, so I'm training. Well, what should we expect? This is fun. Hang on tight. So we have improved productivity. Yep, that's what we want. We should expect that. We should expect improved productivity, especially if that training has to do with technical on how to program. Maybe we need to lessen how many times we're going back to a customer, right? Or mistakes during installation, sales, right? Closing ratios. If we expect improved productivity, that's a return we should see. Now, here's where it gets fun. A product of improved productivity, say that 3 times fast. A product of improved productivity is higher performance. If I can get my employees more productive, I'm going to see better performance. And what will that result in? Profitability. Okay.
We like
I find
profitability.
what's that?
We like profitability.
I mean, right? But unfortunately, there's 2 things before that. Yes, we want profitability, but there's things that have to happen before that. So a lot of times what I've seen in a trend is when I first hire a salesperson, they come in, they do really well. And then within about 3 months, there's a huge dip because they get smart. So the first was just adrenaline, and they were not afraid to ask questions, and they were, they didn't know everything. Then the moment they got all this product training, now they know everything. Now they're word vomiting to customers, right? Their sales results go down. And then that's where we fire them, or we hurt their ego so bad they never recover from it. Okay. Eventually, if that training is right, I can bring them back up and they're higher than ever. And that's an example of how this works. The productivity, performance to profitability.
That's profound right there, Candice. I think that cycle is so prevalent in our industry. You have a salesperson who comes on board and she doesn't know what she doesn't know. So she goes out there and she's excited and she just gets people happy and sells stuff. And then the service department and the installation department clean up the messes. And after a while, somebody says, all right, kid, let me tell you a couple of things. And then they know a lot about what they don't know. And then suddenly they're scared to open their mouth. And then they know a little more. And then they're excited to just vomit out what they know. And suddenly we're not selling anymore.
I see it.
So what you said there is
often,
so profound.
Often. And then that's where we lose them. But that's an opportunity to meld that excitement and that knowledge and bring them together. But we often miss that opportunity because we think that they're just, getting lazy. And again, 80% of the time, are there going to be the 20%? Yeah, I don't care about them. Okay. But I care about the ones we can influence. And we need to understand the training process. And there's going to be a time where it's not profitable.
That makes sense.
Okay. Next, are you ready for the next one? All right. Another expected return, customer satisfaction. Is this financial or non-financial? Non-financial, yep. So here's customer satisfaction. What will that result in? Loyalty. And what does loyalty result in? Here's where it gets fun. Reputation. Okay. So if I have a trained professional staff that knows how to interact with people, are active listeners, know how to communicate, right? How to handle conflict, are good and know their product, all the things, right? My customer is satisfied. They are then loyal to my employees, which makes them loyal to my company. Over time, what's talked about in that community or online leads to an overall reputation, which is what we want, yes?
Absolutely.
Culture.
Absolutely.
Okay. What's another expected return? How about employee retention? Hello, my salespeople. It is like a revolving door sometimes, or we've just got one guy that we're afraid to hire someone else. That's another training for another day. That's such a mistake. But anyway, employee retention. We want to keep people, and we want to keep good people. I will say, I need to make a side note here. I sometimes believed in people more than they believed in themselves, and I kept people much longer than I should have. I think we need to have that discretion of when we need to let go. Okay, but ultimately, I really want to focus on employee retention, and the goal is to keep them. Okay, so what does employee retention lead to? Commitment. Now they become committed to my company. Why? Because I invest in them, I care about them, right? They're committed. What does commitment lead to? Recommendation. So here's an example. How many times has a company said they have a referral program that if you get someone to come on board with the company, we're going to give you $500. If you can recruit a new salesperson or a new service tech and bring them on, $500. How often does that happen? Less than 1%. Your employees will not recommend someone else to come and work for you.
Yeah, makes sense. It's hard to ask an employee to sell their friends, family, neighbors on your business if they're not sold. If
Yeah,
it's just a paycheck,
right. But I can't ask them to recommend anything until they become committed to my company. And what is a commitment? Here's another definition for you. And it's agreement between two parties. A commitment is something between two people. I commit this to you and you commit this to me. It's a marriage, right? And that's why I said at the beginning, you play a role because you're part of the commitment. We expect our employees to commit, but we can find excuses for everything. I need to cancel this sales meeting because I need to handle this. I can't go out in the field with you today because I got to go get caught up on this. No, we need to follow through on our commitments to our staff, because how can we expect them to commit? And we can't, the recommendation, when that's ruined, they won't even recommend, like, if they're a service tech, especially, how many times do you try to get service techs to bring in leads? Why aren't they bringing in leads? Why aren't they recommending you? Because they're not committed. I know that hurts. I know.
Well, I think it's important for leaders to remember that the only way to lead is to serve. And our job as leaders is not to be a boss. There's plenty of memes out there about the difference between bosses and leaders. We don't need to waste our listeners' time. But a true leader, what they do is they go in and they find ways to remove obstacles from their people to execute the company goals, missions, and objectives. And if we're not willing to serve our people, we can't expect them to serve us.
Mm-mm. It is two sides of a coin. It is important. Another expected return. I swear I'm almost done, because each of these pack a little bit of a punch, I know, but you can see that the work will yield the result, and you see how this all ties together to those stats that we saw earlier. If we can get these things aligned and understand the returns, then we can kind of overcome these challenges. But if we don't see the vision or why we're doing something, oftentimes when we reach a challenge, we run from it or get rid of it. And I'm saying plow through it. So expected returns, increased knowledge, right? Education. I expect you to learn, and I expect you to increase in your emotional intelligence, the knowledge, all of those things that we talked about earlier. What does that lead to? Engagement. They become partners with you. They become to bring things. They're engaged in the organization. I kind of compare it, one of my first jobs, I've worked since I was 13, crazy. But one of my first jobs was at a restaurant. And I was, of course, I'm an anomaly, I think. I'm very weird, but I wanted to learn every aspect of that restaurant, from hostess to serving to cooking to the back office, all of those things. I was engaged, and they allowed me to do it, right? I was engaged, I was committed. What does that lead to? What does engagement lead to? Empowerment. Now and if that company, if they've given me the knowledge, then they engage me and want my feedback and allow me to learn and grow and make mistakes. Okay. That eventually leads to empowerment, where now I have a certain amount of power in the organization, authority. And when you can get an employee here and be okay with them doing it, I can't even express to you the return.
I couldn't agree more. That's the holy grail, to train a bunch of independent thinking, responsible people who can work with you towards that common goal.
Yeah.
It's nirvana.
And here's sorry, leaders, but if you are not skilled in those soft skills, when your employees become empowered, it's going to be conflict after conflict after conflict that you don't know how to deal with, because they're going to start bringing you ideas and they're going to start saying, why are we doing this? Right? They're going to start engaging and wanting this authority. And then when you, like we talked about earlier, don't allow that, that comes from your training and being able to facilitate that, because that doesn't come naturally. Those skills aren't inherent and they don't come naturally. They need to be trained.
I agree that that's an ongoing thing. And we have to remember the training goes top down, bottom up, and it has to be continuous. We don't retain knowledge like we think we do.
When I got good at acknowledging when I was wrong is when things really started changing.
That's
Where I said,
profound.
I failed you. I didn't. You are right. But
So
people struggle with
accountability is
that.
a two-way street, right?
Oh, ouch, Craig. It sure is. It sure is. But you're a person just like them, and you started where they are, and I know someone helped you get where you're getting, where
Absolutely.
you're at. So
Absolutely.
I think it's important to remember where you came from.
Absolutely.
Somebody allowed you to be empowered. Somebody gave you authority and power in their organization, and it changed your life.
We
But then
stand up.
we
We
don't give
stand
that
on the
back,
shoulders of giants. We all do.
right?
We
I
can never
love it.
forget that and pay it forward.
I agree. Next, expected return, higher confidence, right? I am a firm believer that there are two qualities that really tend to successful sales: confidence, not arrogance, confidence and empathy. Those are the two things I look for in any salesperson that I hire. But higher confidence now leads to innovation, which is really, it ties with engagement. All of a sudden, they start thinking and coming up with ideas. And yes, I know some are stupid. I don't care. Don't hinder that. Innovation, they start thinking and putting things together and new ideas, right? This is why it's important not to hire people that are just like you, or else this isn't going to happen. But higher confidence leads to innovation, which, here's the last point I want to make on a return, which facilitates a learning culture. If I begin to have innovation, it's going to explore new worlds, and that'll come with learning, right? So then all of a sudden, we've created this learning culture that we want in our organizations.
I like that. I like the learning culture. I like that continuous improvement.
Yeah.
And it has to start at the top. Your management group, your ownership group, if you're not constantly moving forward, there's unfortunately a number of people in our industry that might be multi-generational, where grandpa started it and mom and dad ran it, and now brothers and sisters are in charge, and you can't tell them anything new. We know everything, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And the second you think you know everything, the second you think you got it figured out, you better brace for the fall, because it's going to come quick and it's going to come hard.
Yeah. And then we don't know how to deal with it.
Right.
Yeah. And this is, learning culture is going to be hard for some of you, because especially if you have an older organization or family organization or tenured employees, this isn't going to happen for you in 90 days or 6 months or 9 months. To build a culture takes a lot of time. So I truly believe that a learning culture needs to be a part of your vision, and understand that it's not just going to happen.
Not
When
a one-time
employees
thing.
begin to see that consistency happen, you'll build that vision.
Makes sense.
All right. Where are we at, Greg? Stop. Stop. Because all this sounds good, right? We now, I'm hoping now you're excited and you're starting to come up with ideas and you're like, oh, I got to research people to partner with. And this is the thing, especially if you work with me, there's one key point that I can't have you miss. Okay. All of this is so great, but it can all crumble in a second if you miss this. Do I have your attention?
Oh, you have my attention.
Here is something we need to understand very quickly. Ebbinghaus. Have you ever heard of him? Herman Ebbinghaus.
I heard about him, but then
You're great. A long time ago, this is his forgetting curve. I hope you've seen this. If not, you're welcome. Look at this. Elapsed time since learning. All right. 58% of training is lost in 20 minutes.
yeah, that's a sad truth that I have to agree with.
30 days later, only 21% is retained. And what's the 21% that was retained? I think it's stuff they already knew or they knew a little bit of. I think the things that are forgotten the most quickly are the new concepts, the things that challenge us, right? So how do we combat this, right? Because we can't forget this. How do we combat this forgetting curve? No matter what you do, no matter what training you invest in, there has to be reinforcement. So dealers and manufacturers that I work with, every part of the training program that I have has to have a reinforcement piece. There is no point in hiring me and spending money to bring me out to your organization and meet all your people and do all the prep work if they're not going to invest in the reinforcement phase. Okay. It's part of everything that I do. Why? Because I understand that it's all going to be lost. And I want you to get the most value for what you invest in, right? Investment that we talked about earlier. So, just a word of advice, no matter what you do, no matter who you contract with, no matter what program you buy, no matter what internal structure you put together, there has to be a reinforcement phase that begins immediately after training. Employees need to know what's next. They have to understand that there's a follow through after the fact. Okay, there has to be engage them and facilitate that. Ultimately, we have to close the gap between learning and performance. Okay, I kind of think of it as like weight loss, right? I can read all the books, I can Google everything, I can take all the pills, but if I don't exercise, if I don't act on what I learned, if I don't exercise and eat right, I'm not going to see results. And we need to exercise our learning.
I like that. And that's the best way to overcome the forgetfulness curve is to keep pumping new information into the old brain.
Yeah, that's where the work happens, Greg. Just like I have here, these presentations are great. These tech talks are great. These things that the WQA offers are great. But if we don't have the self motivation to understand how am I going to reinforce this? Well, how am I going to, I've got notebooks. I wish you could see behind my office here. I've got notebooks of notes I've taken from seminars I've been to, and I could pick one up and forget writing anything I ever wrote in them because I didn't bring it back and implement it and reinforce my learning. And what a shame. How much smarter would I be if all those years of dedication, things that were great, or else I wouldn't have wrote them down, right? But the problem is I didn't have any reinforcement structure after the fact.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works. It's I couldn't agree more. You have to learn something and then implement it as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's gone.
We have to have expectations of our employees after the fact. We have to engage them. Sometimes I just do virtual, so, often I'll be in person and then they've got to meet with me once a week and we go over things or they have homework they got to do. It really depends on the type of training, but I need to engage them long term.
I like that. That's smart.
So how do we end this up? We got to end it with Al, right?
We love Al.
Good old Al. I love this quote because I think this is another shift in our thinking we have to do as well. Education is not the learning of facts. We can do a lot of that. I can Google that. The training is teaching the mind to think. We want to teach our employees how to think, how to process, I can't give them the answers to everything. No amount of training. I don't want them to be robots. If this happens, you do this. I want them to have the education that when they're confronted with something, they have the training to be able to process that and think through it, if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. We're not running McDonald's here. The nature of our water quality improvement and management industry, we have people out in the field that are driving motor vehicles, that are visiting with clients, they're going into people's homes. There's a lot of liability. Your risk face is high, but with that high risk comes the high reward. And the only way for everybody to benefit is if your team can think smart.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to get them to think smart, because the 80% need to be trained how to do that. That 20% are usually running their own businesses. And so the 80%, we have to keep nurturing them, training them, and they are our greatest asset. As employees, they are our people. They are who we are. They represent us. And what better way to make sure that we serve our clients better than to serve our employees better?
I think they're one and the same. Imagine, and I guess I'll end with this, Greg. Imagine if we put as much effort into employees as we do trying to get new customers.
That's profound. I like that. I like that a lot.
Just imagine what
So
that might look like, or what that might do for your business, or what that might mean to your employees to know that they are valued more than your customers.
I think we often lose track of that. And it can't be platitudes. It has to be real.
Mm-hmm.
You have to truly appreciate your people. And what better way to show that you appreciate them than by helping their professional development?
Yeah.
Teaching, training, mentoring, coaching.
Yeah.
Candice, wow. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I really appreciate you sharing your time and your expertise with our people. How can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about the services that you offer and to have access to additional wisdom, light, and knowledge from you?
Well, again, I think it's just I'm more than willing to help if anybody has questions for me or anything like that. I think it's important that you find the right fit, in a trainer, because it's a long strategic process. But if you do want to reach out to me, my company is Certified Action. My number, my email, and my website is on there. Again, even if you just want to reach out to kind of say, Candice, this is what I have going on. What do you think? I may not be the right fit for you, but I'll certainly hear what you have to say and see if I can't guide you in the right direction. But I would rather you reach out to me if you have questions about training, than not to train at all.
Yeah, well said. Candice Wentling, Certified Action. Candice, I can't tell you enough. Thank you. I really appreciate your time and being so willing to share with your vast knowledge. Thank you very much for
Thanks,
joining us
Greg,
today.
and good luck, everybody.